Why the heck? What's up? What's up? Okay, listen. I heard the monkey's paw is like really short. I'm thinking of reading. You know what? I wanted to do a reading stream, so I'm very excited to do it. Hey, what's up, everyone? I hope you had a lovely weekend. My name is Dioviron, and I'm a Mako Shark VTuber from another dimension. um, it's kind of hard to try to find good horror that's public domain that I can read. I guess I can venture out to others. We still need to read I think Frankenstein's public domain. And I've read Dracula and I do love it. So I should read it sometime. Um, but yeah, some of them are just like, they aged pretty poorly. Hey Chris, what's up? By the way, some of them aged really poorly. I was looking to see one. I was somewhat curious about it. And if someone was like, if you ignore like when the author like deep dives into like, oh, what is that? Like the human structure anatomy, like when they think it's like science, what is it called, whatever, it's just I was like, okay, I actually don't want to ignore that's insane. Yeah, that's a bit of a problem to try to find in these. But either way, okay, so I've never read The Monkey's Paw. I do know about it. I've seen like, oh yeah, you're not gonna see me because I'm reading. Okay, something just hatched. Yeah, I use this app so I could do my read-alongs just because it comes with music already. Okay, hello little creature. I didn't expect that. Yeah, what's up? Yeah, so because I had a lot of problem with like copyright stuff and I just got really sick of it. So I use this game, just that's me sitting down right there. The different outfits, sure. That's my reading room. I also do that for art sometimes. I have my art room where I just draw. But anyway, so we'll be reading The Monkey's Paw. It's super short. So I'm thinking of reading another short story. I think I looked into, well, I don't know how short it is. It's, oh, what was it called? It was a suggestion. One moment. Let me try to find it. Well, there were mixed reviews about it, but you don't know until you read it, right? So, que se llama, The Great God Pan. Yeah, I wanted to check that one out. I heard that one is a short story, so I see that The Monkey's Paw is actually shorter than I thought it would be. So I'm thinking of reading that one after too. Maybe like the same time. It's been a while since I did a reading stream. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. Yeah. You know what? I did like bicycling today and I'm like super sore. But it was fun. It was like a huge bicycling trip and I haven't cycled in like forever. Whatever. So what I was talking about with The Monkey's Paw, it's written by W.W. Jacobs. There's a lot of references to it. There were a lot of recreations of it too. I remember seeing like a short that I believe was pretty what is the word? Accurate? I don't even want to say accurate. Loyal to the story, essentially. And I believe Blumhouse recently, The Monkey was kind of, wait, let me look it up. Because I don't want to be wrong about this. But it felt a bit inspired, but maybe it wasn't. I could be wrong. Okay, it's a Stephen King short story, The Monkey. Well, it is what it is. There are a lot of recreations of it, but that being said, I've never actually read the story myself, so I'm excited. This story was published in 1902. Okay, let's get into it. Part 1. Without the night was cold and wet, but in the small parlour of Labornum Villa, the blinds were drawn and the fire burned brightly. Father and son were at chess. The former, who possessed ideas about the game involving radical chances, putting his king into such a sharp and unnecessary perils that it even provoked comment from the white-haired old lady knitting placidly by the fire. "Hark at the wind," said Mr. White, who, having seen a fatal mistake after it was too late, was amiably desirous of preventing his son from seeing it. "I'm listening," said the latter, grimly surveying the board as he stretched out his hand. "Check." "I should hardly think he'll come tonight," said his father, with his hand poised over the board. "Mate," replied the son. "That's the worst of living so far out," bawled Mr. White, with sudden and unlooked-for violence. "Of all the beastly, slushy, out-of-the-way places to live in, this is the worst. Path's a bog and the road's a torrent. I don't know what people are thinking about. I suppose because only 2 houses in the road are let, they think it doesn't matter." "Never mind, dear," said his wife soothingly. "Perhaps you'll win the next one." "Thank you." Mr. White looked up sharply, just in time to intercept a knowing glance between mother and son. The words died away on his lips, and he hid a guilty grin in his thin gray beard. "There he is," said Herbert White, as the gate banged too loudly and heavy footsteps came towards the door. The old man rose with hospitable haste. Okay, that makes more sense. And opening the door was heard condoling with the new arrival. The new arrival also condoled with himself. Okay, I need to look up what condoled is because I've never heard that word in my life, actually. ¿Sabes? Do you know what it is? Condole. Oh, like condolences. Okay, that actually does make sense. Okay. I just know my condolences. I've never heard it as a verb. So that Mrs. White said, "Tut tut," and coughed gently as her husband entered the room, followed by a tall, burly man, beady of eye and rubicund of vision. Rubicund? What the heck? Rubicund of vision. Alright. Is an adjective that means having a healthy, reddish, or rosy complexion. When they're red or flushed. Okay. Nice. "Sergeant Major Morris," he said, introducing him. The sergeant major took hands and, taking the proffered seat, they keep using words. That's okay. That's why I like reading this stuff. I don't know. You see stuff that you don't. Okay, what's proffered? Is the past tense of proffer, which means to offer or present. I mean, that's what it sounds like. That's what I figured it was, but I wanted to check. Okay, cool. Taking the proffered seat by the fire, watched contentedly as his host got out whiskey and tumblers and stood at a small copper kettle on the fire. At the third glass, his eyes got brighter, and he began to talk, the little family circle regarding with eager interest this visitor from distant parts, as he squared his broad shoulders in the chair and spoke of wild scenes and doughty deeds, of war and plagues and strange peoples. 21 years of it, said Mr. White, nodding at his wife and son. When he went away, he was a slip of a youth in the warehouse. Now look at him. He doesn't look to have taken much harm, said Mrs. White politely. I'd like to go to India myself, said the old man. Just to look around a bit, you know. Better where you are, said the sergeant major, shaking his head. He put down the empty glass and, sighing softly, shook it again. I should like to see those old temples and fakirs and jugglers, said the old man. What was that you started telling me the other day about monkey's paw or something, Morris? Nothing, said the soldier hastily. Leastways, nothing worth hearing. Monkey's paw, said Mrs. White curiously. Well, it's just a bit of what you might call magic, perhaps, said the sergeant major offhandedly. His three listeners leaned forward eagerly. The visitor absent-mindedly put his empty glass to his lips and then set it down again. His host filled it for him once more. To look at, said the sergeant major, fumbling in his pocket. It's just an ordinary little paw, dried to a mummy. He took something out of his pocket and proffered it. Mrs. White drew back with a grimace, but her son, taking it, examined it curiously. And what is there so special about it? Inquired Mr. White, as he took it from his son, and, having examined it, placed it upon the table. It had a spell put on it by an old fakir. Okay, let me. Yeah, significa. Oh, okay. A Muslim or Hindu religious or wandering monk who renounces worldly goods. Okay. Okay, the magicness and otherworldliness is standard of these old stories, so it's what it is. I read The Exorcist recently, and it was like similar to that in that sense. But the sergeant major, a very holy man, he wanted to show that fate ruled people's lives and that those who interfered with it did so to their sorrow. He put a spell on it so that 3 separate men could each have 3 wishes from it. Oh. His manner was so impressive that his hearers were conscious that their light laughter had jarred somewhat. Well, why don't you have 3, sir? Said Harbert White cleverly. The soldier regarded him the way that middle age is wont regard presumptuous youth. I have, he said quietly, and his blotchy face whitened. And did you really have the 3 wishes granted? Asked Mrs. White. I did, said the sergeant major, and his glass tapped against his strong teeth. And has anybody else wished? Persisted the old lady. The first man had his 3 wishes, yes, was the reply. I don't know what the first 2 were, but the third was for death. That's how I got the paw. His tones were so grave that a hush fell upon the group. If you've had your 3 wishes, it's no good to you now then, Morris, said the old man at last. What do you keep it for? The soldier shook his head. Fancy, I suppose, he said slowly. I did have some idea of selling it, but I don't think I will. It has caused me enough mischief already. Besides, people won't buy. They think it's a fairy tale, some of them. And those who do think anything of it want to try it first and pay me afterwards. I mean, as long as they're paying you, bro. If you could have another 3 wishes, said the old man, eyeing him keenly, would you have them? I don't know, said the other. I don't know. He took the paw and, dangling it between his forefinger and thumb, suddenly threw it upon the fire. White, with a slight cry, stooped down and snatched it off. Better let it burn, said the soldier solemnly. If you don't want it, Morris, said the other, give it to me. Or you could have sold it for the people that want to try it out. I won't, said his friend doggedly. I threw it on the fire. If you keep it, don't blame me for what happens. Pitch it on the fire like a sensible man. The other shook his head and examined his possession closely. How do you do it? He inquired. Don't tell them, man. If you don't want him to use it, don't tell. Okay. Hold it up in your right hand and wish out loud, said the sergeant major. But I warn you of the consequences. Just don't tell him. I think that'd be easy. Sounds like the Arabian Nights, said Mrs. White as she rose and began to set the supper. Don't you think you might wish for 4 pairs of hands for me? Her husband drew the talisman from his pocket, and all 3 burst in laughter as the sergeant major, with a look of alarm in his face, caught him by the arm. If you must wish, he said gruffly, wish for something sensible. Mr. White dropped it back in his pocket and, placing 2 chairs, motioned his friend to the table. In the business of supper, that talisman was partly forgotten, and afterwards the three sat listening in a enthralled fashion to the second installment of the soldier's adventures in India. If the tale about the monkey's paw is not more truthful than those that he had been telling us, said Herbert as the door closed behind their guest, just in time to catch the last. Did he forget? Did the soldier forget? Or he's probably faking it. He probably wanted to pass it on to them. We shan't make much of it. Did you give anything for it, father? Inquired Mrs. White, regarding her husband closely. A trifle, said he, coloring slightly. He didn't want it, but I made him take it, and he pressed me again to throw it away. Likely, said Herbert with pretended horror. Why, we're going to be rich and famous and happy. Wish to be an emperor, father, to begin with. Then you can't be henpecked. He darted round the table, pursued by the maligned Mrs. White, armed with an antimacassar. What is that? What is this? Oh. Okay, let's check it out. A small, often decorative cloth placed over the back or arms of a chair or sofa to keep the permanent fabric clean. Okay. Wait, how do you pronounce it? I'm so silly. I look these up and I don't ask how to pronounce it. Antimacassar. Is that how you say it? Okay. Mr. White took the paw from his pocket and eyed it dubiously. I don't know what to wish for, and that's a fact, he said slowly. It seems to me I've got all I want. Then don't use it, bro. If you only cleared the house, you'd be quite happy, wouldn't you? Said Herbert with his hand on his shoulder. Well, wish for 200 pounds then. That'll just do it. His father, smiling shamefacedly at his own credulity. Is a noun that means willingness to believe things too fast. Ooh. It happens when a person accepts something that as true without proof or good facts. Oh, okay. He gullible. Okay. Held up the talisman as his son, with a solemn face, somewhat marred by a wink at his mother, sat down and struck a few impressive chords. I wish for 200 pounds, said the old man distinctly. A fine crash from the piano greeted his words, interrupted by a shuddering cry from the old man. I am so confused. Wait. I thought Herbert was the dad. But like the old man is his dad? Okay, I think I get it. Okay. So there's 3 wishes, but it's... Okay. Wait, I'm trying to make sense of this. Hold up. Three separate men could have 3 wishes from it. Oh, okay. It literally, he's the last guy to do it then. Okay. Got it. Interesting. So it's not like just meant to just go on. Mr. White, Herbert. A fine crash from the piano greeted his words, interrupted by a shuddering cry from the old man. His wife and son ran towards him. Okay, so the old man is the husband. But there was an actual old man, right? Am I so confused? It moved, he cried with a glance of disgust at the object as it lay on the floor. As I wished, it twisted in my hand like a snake. Well, I don't see the money, said his son as he picked it up and placed it on the table. And I bet I never shall. It must have been your fancy, father, said his wife, regarding him anxiously. He shook his head. Never mind, though. There's no harm done, but it gave me a shock all the same. They sat down by the fire again while the 2 men finished their pipes. Yeah, there are 2 men. And the guest is gone. Okay. Outside, the wind was higher than ever, and the old man stared nervously at the sound of the door banging upstairs. A silence, unusual and depressing, settled on all three, which lasted until the old couple rose to retire for the rest of the night. "I expect you'll find the cash tied up in a big bag in the middle of your bed," said Herbert as he bade them good night, "and something horrible squatting on top of your wardrobe watching you as you pocket your ill-gotten gains." He sat alone in the darkness, gazing at the dying fire and seeing faces in it. The last was so horrible and so Samayan. Well, that's like monkey-like, right? Although I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. That makes sense because like it's a monkey's paw. Like obviously. How do you say it? Simeon. Okay, that makes sense. And so Simeon. Where is it? That he gazed at it in amazement. It got so vivid that, with a little uneasy laugh, he felt on the table for a glass containing a little water to throw over it. His hand grasped the monkey's paw, and with a little shiver, he wiped his hand on his coat and went up to bed. Okay, no, I do get that. Like, not being able to look away, so you're just like feeling out for it. But that's kind of like he held the hand of the monkey. They held hands, guys. Okay, part 2. In the brightness of the wintry sun next morning, as it streamed over the breakfast table, he laughed at his fears. There was an air of prosaic wholesomeness about the room, which it had lacked on the previous night, and a dirty, shriveled little paw was pitched on the sideboard with a carelessness which betokened no great belief in its virtues. "I suppose all old soldiers are the same," said Mrs. White. "The idea of our listening to such nonsense. How could wishes be granted in these days? And if they could, how could 200 pounds hurt you, father?" "Might drop on his head from the sky," said the frivolous Herbert. "Morris said the things happened so naturally," said his father, "that you might, if you so wish, attribute it to coincidence." "Well, don't break into the money before I come back," said Herbert as he rose from the table. "I'm afraid it'll turn you into a mean, avaricious man, and we shall have to disown you." I know what this word is. I do not know how to pronounce it. Okay. Avaricious? What is it? Avaricious. Yeah. Showing a very strong, unhealthy desire to get and keep money or things. Okay. His mother laughed and, following him to the door, watched him down the road and returning to the breakfast table. I am still so confused about who's who, not gonna lie. There's a couple, there's a son, and I'm pretty sure there's an old man. But I thought is Herbert the son then? Okay, Herbert's probably the son. Okay. I'm like, who's Herbert? I'm gonna go to the... Was I just not paying attention? Hold up. The son, Mr. White. Right. And that just says Herbert White. But I guess that's the son. Okay. I really just wanted to see if I got that confused that easy. Okay. Returning to the breakfast table was very happy at the expense of her husband's credulity, all of which did not prevent her from scurrying to the door at the postman's knock, nor prevent her from referring somewhat shortly to retired sergeant majors of bibulous habits, which she found when she found that the post brought a tailor's bill. "Herbert will have some more of his funny remarks, I expect, when he comes home," she said as they sat at dinner. "I dare say," said Mr. White, pouring himself out some beer. "But for all that, the thing moved in my hand. That I'll swear to." "You thought it did," said the old lady soothingly. "I say it did," replied the other. "There's no thought about it. I had just... What's the matter?" His wife made no reply. She was watching the mysterious movements of a man outside who, peering in an undecided fashion at the house, appeared to be trying to make up his mind to enter. In mental connection. Is it pronounced connection? Wait, this is kind of... I think it is. It's not spelled like the connection. I know it is. There's an older, chiefly British spelling of connection. Okay. It's with an X. That threw me off. In mental connection with the 200 pounds, she noticed that the stranger was well-dressed and wore a silk hat of glossy newness. 3 times he paused at the gate and then walked on again. The 4th time, he stood with his hands upon it, and then, with sudden resolution, flung it open and walked up the path. Mrs. White, at the same moment, placed her hands behind her and hurriedly, unfastening the strings of her apron, put that useful article of apparel beneath the cushion of her chair. She brought the stranger, who seemed ill at ease, into the room. He gazed at her furtively and listened in a preoccupied fashion as the old lady apologized for the appearance of the room and her husband's coat, a garment which he usually reserved for the garden. She then waited as patiently as her sex would permit for him to broach his business, but he was at first strangely silent. "I was asked to call," he said at last, and stooped and picked a piece of cotton from his trouser. "I came from Ma and Megan's." The old lady started. "Is anything the matter?" she asked breathlessly. "Has anything happened to Herbert? What is it? What is it?" Her husband interposed. There, mother," he said hastily. "Sit down and don't jump to conclusions. You've not brought bad news, I'm sure, sir," and he eyed the other wistfully. "I'm sorry," began the visitor. "Is he hurt?" demanded the mother wildly. The visitor bowed in assent. "Badly hurt," he said quietly, "but he's not in any pain." "Oh, thank God," said the old woman, clasping her hands. "Thank God for that. She broke off as the sinister meaning of the assurance dawned on her, and she saw the awful confirmation of her fears in the other's averted face. She caught her breath, and turning to her slower-witted husband, laid her trembling hand on his. There was a long silence. "He was caught in the machinery," said the visitor at length in a low voice. "Caught in the machinery," repeated Mr. White in a dazed fashion. "Yes." He sat staring out of the window and, taking his wife's hand between his own, pressed it as he had been wont to do in their old courting days nearly 40 years before. "He was the only one left to us." "He was the only one left to us," he said, turning gently to the visitor. "It is hard." The other coughed and, rising, walked slowly to the window. "The firm wishes me to convey their sincere sympathy with you in your great loss," he said, without looking round. "I beg that you will understand that I am only their servant and merely obeying orders." There was no reply. The old woman's face was white, her eyes staring, and her breath inaudible. On the husband's face was a look such as his friend the sergeant might have carried into his first action. "I was to say that Ma and Megan's disclaim all responsibility," continued the other. "They admit no liability at all, but in consideration of your son's services, they wish to present you with a certain sum as compensation." Mr. White dropped his wife's hand and, rising to his feet, gazed with a look of horror at his visitor. His dry lips shaped the words. "How much?" £200, was the answer. Unconscious of his wife's shriek, the old man smiled faintly, put out his hands like a sightless man, and dropped, a senseless heap, to the floor. Part 3, parte 3. In the huge new cemetery, some 2 miles distant, the old people buried their dead, then came back to the house steeped in shadows and silence. It was all over so quickly that at first they could hardly realize it, and remained in a state of expectation, as though of something else to happen. As though of something else to happen, something else which was to lighten this load, too heavy for old hearts to bear. But the days passed, and expectation gave way to resignation, the hopeless resignation of the old, sometimes miscalled apathy. Sometimes they hardly exchanged a word, for now they had nothing to talk about, and their days were long to weariness. It was about a week after the old man, waking suddenly in the night, stretched out his hand and found himself alone. The room was in darkness, and the sound of subdued weeping came from the window. He raised himself in bed and listened. "Come back," he said tenderly. "You will be cold." "It is colder for my son," said the old woman, and wept afresh. The sound of her sobs died away on his ears. The bed was warm and his eyes heavy with sleep. He dozed fitfully and then slept until a sudden wild cry from his wife awoke him with a start. "The paw!" she cried wildly. "The monkey's paw!" He started up in alarm. Where is it? What's the matter?" She came stumbling across the room towards him. "I want it," she said quietly. "You've not destroyed it?" I made her speak louder than she should have, probably. "It's in the parlor on the bracket," he replied, marveling. "Why?" She cried and laughed together, and bending over, kissed his cheek. "I only just thought of it," she said hysterically. "Why didn't I think about it before? Why didn't you think of it?" "Think of what?" he questioned. "The other 2 wishes," she replied rapidly. "We've only had one." "Was not that enough?" he demanded fiercely. "No," she cried triumphantly. "We'll have one more. Go down and get it quickly, and wish our boy alive again." The man sat in bed and flung the bedclothes from his quaking limbs. "Good God, you are mad," he cried aghast. "Get it." "Get it," she panted. "Get it quickly and wish, oh, my boy, my boy." Her husband struck a match and lit the candle. "Get back to bed," he said unsteadily. "You don't know what you're saying." "We've had the first wish granted," said the old woman feverishly. "Why not the second?" "A coincidence," stammered the old man. "Go get it and wish," cried his wife, quivering with excitement. The old man turned and regarded her, and his voice shook. "He has been dead 10 days, and besides I would not tell you else, but I could only recognize him by his clothing. If he was too terrible for you to see then, how now?" "Bring him back," cried the old woman, and dragged him towards the door. "Do you think I fear the child I have nursed?" He went down in the darkness and felt his way to the parlor, and then to the mantelpiece. The talisman was in its place, and a horrible fear that the unspoken wish might bring his mutilated son before him ere he could escape from the room seized upon him, and he caught his breath as he found that he had lost the direction of the door. His brow cold with sweat, he felt his way round the table and groped along the wall until he found himself in the small passage with the unwholesome thing in his hand. Even his wife's face seemed to change as he entered the room. It was white and expectant, and to his fears seemed to have an unnatural look upon it. He was afraid of her. "Wish!" she cried in a strong voice. "It is foolish and wicked," he faltered. "Wish!" repeated his wife. He raised his hand. "I wish my son alive again." The talisman fell to the floor, and he regarded it fearfully. Then he sank, trembling, into a chair as the old woman, with burning eyes, walked to the window and raised the blind. He sat until he was chilled with the cold, glancing occasionally at the figure of the old woman peering through the window. The candle end, which had burned below the rim of a china candlestick, was thrown pulsating shadows on the ceilings and walls, until, with a flicker larger than the rest, it expired. The old man, with an unspeakable sense of relief at the failure of the talisman, crept back to his bed. And a minute afterwards, the old woman came silently and apathetically beside him. Neither spoke, but sat silently, listening to the ticking of the clock. A stair creaked and a squeaky mouse scurried noisily through the wall. The darkness was oppressive, and after lying for some time, screwing up his courage, he took up the box of matches and, striking one, went downstairs for a candle. At the foot of the stairs, the match went out, and he paused to strike another. And at the same moment, a knock so quiet and stealthy as to be scarcely audible sounded on the front door. The matches fell from his hand and spilled in the passage. He stood motionless, his breath suspended, until the knock was repeated. Then he turned and fled swiftly back to his room and closed the door behind him. The third knock sounded through the house. "What's that?" cried the old woman, starting up. "A rat," said the old man in shaking tones. "A rat. It passed me on the stairs." His wife sat up in bed listening. A loud knock resounded through the house. "It's Herbert!" She ran to the door, but her husband was before her, and catching her by the arm held her tightly. "What are you going to do?" he whispered hoarsely. "It's my boy! It's Herbert!" she cried, struggling mechanically. "I forgot it was 2 miles away. What are you holding me for? Let go! I must open the door." "For God's sake, don't let it in!" cried the old man, trembling. "You're afraid of your own son," she cried, struggling. "Let me go! I'm coming, Herbert! I'm coming!" There was another knock, and another. The old woman was, with a sudden wrench, broke free and ran from the room. Her husband followed to the landing and called after her appealingly as she hurried down the stairs. He heard the chain rattle back and the bolt drawn slowly and stiffly from the socket. Then the old woman's voice, strained and panting. "The bolts!" she cried loudly. "Come down! I can't reach it!" But her husband was on his hands and knees, groping wildly on the floor in search of the paw. If only he could find it before this thing outside got in. A perfect salad? What is that? Let's I don't even know how to pronounce that one. Okay. Fusillade is a large number of shots fired at the same time or in rapid succession. Okay. A perfect fusillade of knocks reverberated through the house, and he heard the scraping of a chair as his wife put it down in the passage against the door. So it came from like a quiet knock to louder knocks to a perfect fusillade of knocks. Okay, like that's really I'm not doing it justice. It's probably really creepy. Let's put it down in the passage against the door. He heard the creaking of the bolt. Yay! What's up, Ajax? Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I hope you had a lovely weekend. Yeah. Whoa, that's not the setting to do at a climax of the story. Oh man. A perfect fusillade of knocks reverberated through the door, and he heard the scraping of a chair as his wife put it down in the passage against the door. He heard the creaking of the bolt as it came slowly back, and at the same time, he found the monkey's paw and frantically breathed his third and last wish. The knocking ceased suddenly, although the echoes of it were still in the house. He heard the chair drawn back and the door open. A cold wind rushed up in the staircase, and a long, loud wail of disappointment and misery from his wife gave him the courage to run down to her side, and then to the gate beyond. The street lamp, flickering opposite, shone on a quiet and deserted road. All right, yeah. How you like them apples? Okay, yeah. You know, so the shorts, I know it ends abruptly. It ends and you don't really know what his wish is, but you can imply it, right? That he... I don't know. That wish probably came true in a good fashion. I don't see a consequence for that one. This is an older story, so I do like the fact that he can kind of take back his wish, so he has to use another wish for it, which also gets used in different media. Yeah, a lot of adaptations actually show the dead son all mangled up. I don't remember where it was though, but there was another horror like series that kind of did something similar to it, where the wife wished the husband back. It's okay, that's fine. The wife wished the husband to come back alive, and he was like in the casket, and then he was like, it hurts. That was pretty dope. It was also older. It was an older series. I do not remember what it was though, but yeah, it's a very brief, very short story. Less than an hour. Hello. Yeah, it's very what direct. Like, the adaptations must have been very easy with the dialogue that it did, compared to like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That one was very different, I think. I mean, similar, but I think they made great changes to it for adaptations and stuff like that. Which, yeah, I would like. I think this influenced it. I think this influenced it a lot. But like, let's say Obsession. I love that movie. I do love that movie. I do like in Obsession, what was it called? The Wishing Willow. Right. It kind of has this monkey paw appeal, but in that movie, actually, the director did confirm that the wishes aren't inherently evil, and you could make like I want to say benign wish, yeah. And so it gives more autonomy for consequences for the protagonist. But I mean, I don't know, Monkey's Paw is classic. I just feel like I don't know, I like it a lot. And I do feel like it did influence a bunch of stuff. Okay, so I did not expect the story to be this short. I appreciate it, Chris, by the way. So let's try The Great God Pan by Arthur Machen. I've heard different things about it. Wait, I'll be right back. I'm gonna change the book cover because I like look, check my desk. Wait, once it turns around, yeah, there's like a tiny little book in the corner, and I always change that to whatever story we're reading. It's very small, you can't really see it, but it's just a thing I like to do. So let me change that real quick, and then I'll be back. All right. Oof. You know what? This one seems a lot longer, but we'll see. I do know there's like footnotes and stuff like that in the end, so maybe that's why it looks a lot longer, but we'll check it out. Okay, so this next story is The Great God Pan. The author is Arthur Machen. I have not checked out his works. Like, wait, let me see if I'm saying his last name right. I'm like really bad at that kind of stuff. How do I check that out? Machen. Okay, see, that's that's not correct. All right. This was released January 1st, 1996. All right. I did somewhat read what it's about a bit, but I'm not sure what else to expect from it. I don't know. Since it's horror, wait, what would you consider? I do want to check out the genre. Sometimes it's like not horror, although it's like, what would you consider? Oh yeah, it says horror fiction. Okay, gothic horror fiction. Okay, well within the gothic genre, I will like warn, you know, some stuff is a little freaky, so I don't know what to expect, but there might be some freaky stuff. So I just want to, not even just scary, just like taboo stuff, you know. We'll see though. I don't know if I've never read this, so we're in this together, all right? Part 1, The Experiment. I'm glad you came, Clark. Very glad indeed. I was not sure you could spare the time. I was able to make arrangements for a few days. Things are not very lively just now. But have you no misgivings, Raymond? Is it absolutely safe? The two men were slowly pacing the terrace in front of Dr. Raymond's house. The sun still hung above the western mountain line, but it shone with a dull red glow that casts no shadows. And all the air was quiet. A sweet breath came from the great woods on the hillsides above, and with it, at intervals, the soft murmuring call of the wild dove. Below, in the long, lovely valley, the river wound in and out between the lonely hills, and as the sun hovered and vanished into the west, a faint mist, pure white, began to rise from the hills. Dr. Raymond turned sharply to his friend. Safe? Of course it is. In itself, the operation is a perfectly simple one. Any surgeon can do it. And there's no danger at any other stage? None. Absolutely no physical danger whatsoever, I give you my word. You are always timid, Clark, always. But you know my history. I have devoted myself to transcendental medicine for the last 20 years. I have heard myself called quack and charlatan and impostor, but all the while I knew I was on the right path. 5 years ago, I reached the goal, and since then, every day has been a preparation for what we shall do tonight. I should like to believe it is all true. Clark knits his brows and looked doubtfully at Dr. Raymond. Are you perfectly sure, Raymond, that your theory is not a phantasmagoria, a splendid vision, certainly, but a mere vision after all? Dr. Raymond stopped in his walk and turned sharply. He was a middle-aged man, gaunt and thin, of a pale yellow complexion, but as he answered Clark and faced him, there was a flush on his cheek. Look about you, Clark. You see the mountain and hill following after hill. As wave on wave, you see the woods and orchard. Okay, I was like, how the fuck do you pronounce? I do know that word. The fields of ripe corn and the meadows reaching to the reed beds by the river. You see me standing here beside you and hear my voice, but I tell you that all these things, yes, from that star that has just shone out in the sky to the solid ground beneath our feet, I say that all these are but dreams and shadows, the shadows that hide the real world from our eyes. There is a real world, but it is beyond this glamour and this vision, beyond these faces and auras. Auras? Dreams and a career, beyond them all, as beyond a veil. I do not know whether any human being has ever lifted that veil, but I do know, Clark, that you and I shall see it lifted this very night from before another's eyes. You may think this is all strange nonsense. It may be strange, but it is true, and the ancients knew what lifting the veil means. They called it seeing the god Pan. Yeah. Yeah, I'm very intrigued. I did hear that it spooked some folks out. Clark shivered. The white mist gathering over the river was chilly. It is wonderful indeed, he said. We are standing on the brink of a strange world, Raymond. If what you say is true, I suppose the knife is absolutely necessary? Yes, a slight lesion in the gray matter, that is all. A trifling rearrangement of certain cells, a microscopical alteration that would escape the attention of 99 brain specialists out of 100. I don't want to bother you with shop, Clark. I might give you a mass of technical detail which would sound very imposing and would leave you as enlightened as you are now. But I suppose you have read casually in out-of-the-way corners of your paper that immense strides had been made recently in the physiology of the brain. I saw a paragraph the other day about Digby's theory and Brown-Faber's discoveries. Theories and discoveries. Where they are standing now, I stood 15 years ago, and I need not tell you that I have not been standing still for the last 15 years. It will be enough if I say that 5 years ago I made the discovery that I alluded to, when I said that 10 years ago I reached the goal. After years of labor, after years of toiling and groping in the dark, after days and nights of disappointments, and sometimes of despair in which I used now and then to tremble and grow cold with the thought that perhaps there were others seeking for what I sought, at last, after so long, a pang of sudden joy thrilled my soul, and I knew the long journey was at an end. Oh no, your Twitch killed itself? No! Stay with me, Chris. By what seemed then and still seems a chance, the suggestion of a moment's idle thought followed up on familiar lines and paths that I had tracked 100 times already. The great truths burst upon me, and I saw, mapped out in lines of sight, a whole world, a sphere unknown, continents and islands and great oceans in which no ship has sailed, to my belief, since a man first lifted up his eyes and beheld the sun, and the stars of heaven and the quiet earth beneath. You will think this all high-flown language, Clark, but it is hard to be literal, and yet I do not know whether I am hinting at what I'm hinting at cannot be set forth in plain and lonely terms. For instance, this world of ours is pretty well girded now with the telegraph wires and cables and thought with something less than the speed of thought, flashes from sunrise to sunset, from north to south, across the floods and the desert places. Yay, welcome back. Suppose that an electrician of today were suddenly to perceive that he and his friends have merely been playing with pebbles and mistaking them for the foundations of the world. Suppose that such a man saw uttermost space lie open before their currents, and words of man flash forth to the sun, and beyond the sun into the systems beyond, and the voices of articulate speaking men echo into the waste voids that bounds our thoughts. As analogies go, that is a pretty good analogy of what I have done. You can understand now a little of what I felt as I stood here one evening. It was a summer evening, and the valley looked much as it does now. I stood here and saw before me the unutterable, the unthinkable gulf that yawns profound between two worlds, the world of matter and the world of spirit. I saw the great, empty, deep stretch dim before me, and in that instant a bridge of light leapt from the earth to the unknown shore, and the abyss was spanned. You may look in Brown-Faber's book if you like, and you will find that to the present day men of science are unable to account for the presence or to specify the functions of a certain group of nerve cells in the brain. That group is, as it were, land to let, a mere waste place for fanciful theories. I am not in the position of Brown, Faber, and the specialists. I am perfectly instructed as to the possible functions of those nerve centers in the scheme of things. With a touch, I can bring them into play. With a touch, I say, I can set free the current. With a touch, I can complete the communication between this world of sense, and we shall be able to finish the sentence later on. Yes, the knife is necessary, but think what the knife will effect. It will level utterly the solid wall of sense, and probably for the first time since man was made, a spirit will gaze on a spirit world. Clark, Mary will see the god Pan. But you remember what you wrote to me. I thought it would be requisite that he whispered the rest in the doctor's ear. Not at all, not at all. That is nonsense, I assure you. Indeed, it is better as it is. I am quite certain of that. Consider the matter well, Raymond. It's a great responsibility. Something might go wrong. You would be a miserable man for the rest of your days. No, I think not. Even if the worst happened. As you know, I rescued Mary from the gutter and from almost certain starvation when she was a child. I think her life is mine, to use as I see fit. Come, it's getting late. We had better go in. Damn, okay, Mr. Mad Father. Getting Mad Father vibes from this guy. Hold up, what you mean? Just because you rescued someone doesn't mean their life is yours, the hell? Don't piss me off, Dr. Raymond. Dr. Raymond led the way into the house, through the hall, and down a long, dark passage. He took a key from his pocket and opened a heavy door and motioned Clark into his laboratory, right? That's how you say it. It had once been a billiard room. I think that's how you say it. I know what it is. And was lighted by a glass dome in the center of the ceiling, whence there still shone a sad gray light on the figure of the doctor as he lit a lamp with a heavy shade and placed it on a table in the middle of the room. Clark looked about him. Scarcely a foot of wall remained bare. There were shelves all around laden with bottles and phials of all shapes and colors, and at one end stood a little Chippendale bookcase. What is a Chippendale bookcase? I've never heard that word. I mean, I know what Chip and Dale is. Not this. Hold up. 18th century style of English furniture named after the renowned London cabinet maker, Thomas Chippendale. All right. Interesting. It looks fancy. Okay. I do like ornate type of furniture. It is fascinating to look at. I wouldn't have it myself because I think it'd feel uncomfortable and also like too fancy to sit on, but I do like looking at it like in museums and stuff. Raymond pointed to this. Okay, wait. What did he point to? The little Chippendale bookcase. Okay. You see that parchment, Oswald Crollius? He was one of the first to show me the way, though I don't think he'd ever found it himself. That is a strange saying of his. That in every grain of wheat there lies hidden the soul of a star. There was not much furniture in the laboratory. Right. The table in the center, a stone slab with a drain in the one corner, the two armchairs on which Raymond and Clark were sitting. That was all, except an odd-looking chair at the furthest end of the room. Clark looked at it and raised his eyebrows. Yes, that is the chair, said Raymond. We may as well place it in position. He got up and wheeled the chair to the light and began raising and lowering it, letting down the seat, setting the back at various angles and adjusting the footrest. It looked comfortable enough, and Clark passed his hand over the soft green velvet as the doctor manipulated the levers. "Now, Clark, make yourself quite comfortable. I have a couple of hours' work before me. I was obliged to leave certain matters to the last." Raymond went to the stone slab, and Clark watched him drearily as he bent over a row of files and lit the flame under a crucible. The doctor had a small hand lamp shaded as the larger one on a ledge above his apparatus, and Clark, who sat in the shadows, looked down at the great shadowy room, wondering at the bizarre effects of the brilliant light and undefined darkness contrasting with one another. Soon he became conscious of an odd odor, at first the merest suggestion of odor in the room, and as it grew more decided, he felt surprised that he was not reminded of the chemist's shop or the surgery. Clark found himself idly endeavoring to analyze the sensation, and half conscious, he began to think of a day 15 years ago that he had spent roaming through the woods and meadows near his own home. It was a burning day at the beginning of August. The heat had dimmed the outlines of all things and all distances with a faint mist, and people who observed the thermometer spoke of an abnormal register of a temperature that was almost tropical. Strangely, that wonderful hot day of the 50s rose up again in Clark's imagination. The sense of dazzling, all-pervading sunlight seemed to bolt out the shadows and the lights of the laboratory, and he felt again the heated air beating in gusts about his face, saw the shimmer rising from the turf, and heard the myriad. Wait, how do you pronounce that? Myriad, right? Oh, yeah. Myriad, okay. A very large number or countless amount of people or things. Heard the myriad murmur of the summer. Okay. "I hope the smell doesn't annoy you, Clark. There's nothing unwholesome about it. It may make you a bit sleepy, that's all." Clark heard the words quite distinctly and knew that Raymond was speaking to him, but for the life of him he could not rouse himself from his lethargy. I'm probably saying these words wrong. I keep interrupting my own speech. Lethargy. Okay. That was close. He could only think of a lonely walk he had taken 15 years ago. It was his last look at the fields and the woods he had known since he was a child, and now it all stood out in brilliant light as a picture before him. Above all, there came to his nostrils the scent of summer. The smell of flowers mingled in the odor of the woods, of cool shaded places, deep in the green depths, drawn forth by the sun's heat and the scent of the good earth, lying, as it were, with arms stretched forth and smiling lips overpowered all. His fancies made him wander, as he had wandered long ago from the fields into the woods, tracking a little path between the shining undergrowth of beech trees and the trickle of water dropping from the limestone rock sounded as a clear melody in the dream. Thoughts began to go astray and to mingle with other thoughts. The beech alley was transformed to a path between ilex trees, and here and there a vine climbed from bough to bough and sent up the waving tendrils, and it drooped with purple grapes, and the sparse gray-green leaves of a wild olive tree stood out against the dark shadows of the ilex. Clark, in the deep vault of his dreams, was conscious that the path from his father's house had led him into an undiscovered country, and he was wondering at the strangeness of it all, when suddenly, in the place of the hum and murmur of the summer, an infinite silence seemed to fall on all things, and the wood was hushed, and for a moment in time he stood face to face there with a presence that was neither man nor beast, neither the living nor the dead, But all things mingled, the form of all things, but devoid of all form. And in that moment, the sacrament of body and soul was dissolved, and a voice seemed to cry, "Let us go hence." And then the darkness of darkness beyond the stars, the darkness of everlasting. When Clark woke up with a start, he saw Raymond pouring a few drops of some oily fluid into a green phial, which he stoppered tightly. Wait, I need vial? I think it's pronounced vial. It's like vial. It's like an old-fashioned way. I think that was in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. "You have been dozing," he said. "The journey must have tired you out. It is done now. I'm going to fetch Mary. I shall be back in 10 minutes. Clark lay back in his chair and wondered. It seemed as if he had but passed from one dream to another. He half expected to see the walls of the laboratory melt and disappear, and to awake in London, shuddering at his own sleeping fancies. But at last the door opened and the doctor returned, and behind him came a girl of about 17, dressed all in white. She was so beautiful that Clark did not wonder what the doctor had written to him. She was blushing now over face and neck and arms, but Raymond seemed unmoved. "Mary," he said, "the time has come. You are quite free. Are you willing to trust yourself to me entirely?" Oh, that's Raymond. Well, okay. "Yes, dear." "Do you hear that, Clark? You are my witness. Here is the chair, Mary. It is quite easy. Just sit in it and lean back. Are you ready?" "Yes, dear, quite ready. Give me a kiss before you begin." "Brother." Okay. The doctor stooped and kissed her mouth. "What did you do to this child? I'm gonna kill him. This is mad father all over again." "Kindly enough. Kindly, whatever. Okay. Now shut your eyes," he said. The girl closed her eyelids as if she were tired and longed for sleep, and Raymond placed the green vial to her nostrils. Her face grew white, whiter than her dress. She struggled faintly, and then, with the feeling of submission strong within her, crossed her arms upon her breast as a little child about to say her prayers. The bright light of the lamp fell full upon her, and Clark watched changes fleeting over her face, as the changes of the hills when the summer clouds float across the sun. And then she lay all white and still, and the doctor turned up one of her eyelids. She was quite unconscious. Raymond pressed hard on one of the levers, and the chair instantly sank back. Clark saw him cutting away a circle, like a tonsure. Tonsure? What is that? Tonsure? The practice of cutting or shaving part or all of the hair in the scalp as a sign of religious devotion. Okay. He did what? Cutting away a circle like a tonsure from her hair. Oh, he's taking her hair. Okay. And the lamp was moved nearer. Raymond took a small glittering instrument from a little case, and Clark turned away shudderingly. When he looked again, the doctor was binding up the wound he had made. "She will awake in 5 minutes." Raymond was still perfectly cool. "There is nothing more to be done. We can only wait." The minutes passed slowly. They could hear a slow, heavy ticking. There was an old clock in the passage. Clark felt sick and faint. His knees shook beneath him. He could hardly stand. Suddenly, as they watched, they heard a long-drawn sigh, and suddenly did the color that had vanished return to the girl's cheeks, and suddenly her eyes opened. Clark quailed before them. They shone with an awful light, looking far away, and a great wonder fell upon her face, and her hand stretched out as if to touch what was invisible. But in an instant the wonder faded and gave place to the most awful terror. The muscles of her face were hideously convulsed. She shook from head to foot. The soul seemed struggling and shuddering within the house of flesh. It was a horrible sight. and Clark rushed forward as she fell shrieking to the floor. 3 days later, Raymond took Clark to Mary's bedside. She was lying wide awake, rolling her head from side to side and grinning vacantly. Yes, the doctor's still quite cool. Said the doctor still quite cool. It is a great pity. She is a hopeless idiot. However, it cannot be helped, and after all, she has seen the great god Pan. I mean, sorry she cared about you because you saved her and she thought that you cared about her too. Damn. Ooh, I want to kill. I hope Raymond dies by the end of this. Alright, we're in part 2. Part 2, Mr. Clark's memories. Memoirs. Mr. Clark, the gentleman chosen by Dr. Raymond to witness the strange experiment of the god Pan, was a person in whose character, caution, and curiosity were oddly mingled. In his sober moments, he thought of the unusual and eccentric with undistinguished aversion, and yet deep in his heart there was a wide-eyed inquisitiveness with respect to all the more recondite and esoteric elements in the nature of men. The latter tendency had prevailed when he accepted Raymond's invitation, for though his considered judgment had always repudiated the doctor's theory as the wildest nonsense, yet he secretly hugged a belief in fantasy and would have rejoiced to see that belief confirmed. The horrors that he witnessed in the dreary laboratory were to a certain extent salutary. He was conscious of being involved in an affair not altogether reputable, and for many years afterwards he clung bravely to that commonplace and rejected all occasions of occult investigation. Indeed, on some homeopathic principle, he for some time attended the seances of distinguished mediums, hoping that the clumsy tricks of these gentlemen would make him altogether disgusted with mysticism of every kind. But the remedy, though caustic, was not efficacious. Clark knew that he still pined for the unseen, and little by little the old passage began to reassert itself as the face of Mary, shuddering and convulsed with an unknown terror, faded slowly from his memory. Occupied all day in pursuits both serious and lucrative, the temptation to relax in the evening was too great, especially in the winter months, when the fire cast a warm glow over his snug bachelor apartment, and the bottle of some choice claret stood ready by his elbow. His dinner digested, he would make a brief pretense of reading the evening paper, but the mere catalogue of news soon paled upon him, and Clark would find himself casting glances of warm desire in the direction of an old Japanese bureau which stood at a pleasant distance from the hearth. Like a boy before a jam closet, for a few minutes he would hover indecisive, but lust always prevailed, and Clark ended by drawing up his chair, lighting a candle, and sitting down before the bureau. Its pigeonholes and drawers teemed with documents of the most morbid subjects, and in the well reposed a large manuscript volume, in which he had painfully entered the gems of his collections. Clark had a fine contempt for published literature. The most ghostly story ceased to interest him, if it happened to be printed. That's kind of funny adding that in a horror story, but okay. His sole pleasure was in the reading, compiling, and rearranging what he called his memoirs to prove the existence of the devil, and engaged in this pursuit, the evening seemed to fly, and the night appeared too short. On one particular evening, an ugly December night, black with fog and raw with frost, Clark hurried over his dinner and scarcely deigned to observe his customary ritual of taking up the paper and laying it down again. He paced 2 or 3 times up and down the room and opened the bureau, stood still for a moment, and sat down. He leant back and, absorbed in one of those dreams to which he was subject, and at length drew out his book and opened it to the last entry. There were 3 or 4 pages densely covered with Clark's round-set penmanship, and at the beginning he had written in somewhat larger hand, "Singular narrative told to me by my friend Dr. Phillips. He assures me that all the facts related therein are strictly and wholly true, but refuses to give either the surnames of the person concerned or the place where these extraordinary events occurred." Mr. Clark began to read over the account for the 10th time, glancing now and then at the penciled notes he had made when it was told him by his friend. It was one of his humors to pride himself on a certain literary ability. He thought well of his style and took pains in arranging the circumstances in dramatic order. He read the following story. The persons concerned in this statement are Helen V., who, if she is still alive, must now be a woman of 23. Rachel M., since deceased, who was a year younger than the above, and Trevor W., an imbecile, aged 18. I don't appreciate y'all calling folks that, but okay. These scientists type. Not all, but in this story, I mean, dang. These persons were at the same period of the story inhabitants of a village on the border of Wales, a place of some importance in the time of the Roman occupation, but now a scattered hamlet of not more than 500 souls. It is situated on rising ground about 6 miles from the sea and is sheltered by a large picturesque forest. Some 11 years ago, Helen V. came to the village under rather peculiar circumstances. It is understood that she, being an orphan, was adopted in her infancy by a distant relative, who brought her up in his own house until she was 12 years old. Thinking, however, that it would be better for a child to have playmates of her own age, he advertised in several local papers for a good home in a comfortable farmhouse for a girl of 12, and this advertisement was answered by Mr. R., a well-to-do farmer in the above-mentioned village. I'm getting uncomfortable, okay. His reference proving satisfactory, the gentleman sent his adopted daughter to Mr. R. with a letter in which he stipulated that the girl should have a room to herself and stated that her guardians need be at no trouble in the matter of education, as she was already sufficiently educated for the position in life which she would occupy. In fact, Mr. R. was given to understand that the girl be allowed to find her own occupations and to spend her time almost as she liked. Mr. R. duly met her at the nearest station, a town 7 miles away from his house, and seems to have remarked nothing extraordinary about the child except that she was reticent as to her former life and her adopted father. She was, however, of a very different type from the inhabitants of the village. Her skin was a pale, clear olive, and her features were strongly marked and of a somewhat foreign character. She appears to have settled down easily enough into farmhouse life and became a favorite with the children, who sometimes went with her on her rambles in the forest, for this was her amusement. Mr. R. states that he has known her to go out by herself directly after their early breakfast and not return till after dusk, and that, feeling uneasy at a young girl being out alone for so many hours, he communicated with her adopted father, who replied in the brief note that Helen must do as she chose. In the winter, when the forest paths are impassable, she spent most of her time in her bedroom, where she slept alone, according to the instructions of her relative. It was on one of these expeditions to the forest that the first of the singular incidents with which this girl is connected occurred, the date being about a year after her arrival at the village. The preceding winter had been remarkably severe, the snow drifting to a great depth, and the frost continuing for an unexampled period, and the summer following was as noteworthy for its extreme heat. On one of the very hottest days in this summer, Helen V. left the farmhouse for one of her long rambles in the forest. taking with her, as usual, some bread and meat for lunch. Let me drink water. She was seen by some men in the fields making for the old Roman road, a green causeway which traverses the highest part of the woods, and they were astonished to observe that the girl had taken off her hat, though the heat of the sun was already tropical. As it happened, a laborer, Joseph W. by name, was working in the forest near the Roman road, and at 12 o'clock, his little son Trevor brought the man his dinner of bread and cheese. After the meal, the boy, who was about 7 years old at the time, left his father at work and, as he said, went to look for flowers in the woods. And the man, who could hear him shouting with delight at his discoveries, felt no uneasiness. Suddenly, however, he was horrified at hearing the most dreadful screams, evidently the result of a great terror, proceeding from the direction in which his son had gone, and he hastily threw down his tools and ran to see what happened. Tracing his path by the sound, he met the little boy, who was running headlong and was evidently terribly frightened, and on questioning him, the man elicited that after picking a posy of flowers, he felt tired and lay down on the grass and fell asleep. He was suddenly awakened, as he stated, by a peculiar noise, a sort of singing, he called it, and on peeping through the branches, he saw Helen V. playing on the grass with a strange naked man who he seemed unable to describe more fully. He said he felt dreadfully frightened and ran away crying for his father. Joseph W. proceeded in the direction indicated by his son and found Helen V. sitting on the grass in the middle of the glade or open space left by charcoal burners. He angrily charged her with frightening his little boy, but she entirely denied the accusation and laughed at the child's story of a strange man, to which he himself did not attach much credence. Much credence? I think it's credence, right? Joseph W. came to the conclusion that the boy had woken up with such a fright, as children sometimes do, but Trevor persisted in his story and continued in such an evident distress that at last his father took him home, hoping that his mother would be able to soothe him. For many weeks, however, the boy gave his parents much anxiety. He became nervous and strange in his manner, refusing to leave the cottage by himself and constantly alarming the household by waking in the night with the cries of, "The man in the woods! Father! Father!" In course of time, however, the impression seemed to have worn off, and about 3 months later he accompanied his father to the home of a gentleman in the neighborhood for whom Joseph W. occasionally did work. The man was shown into the study, and the little boy was left sitting in the hall, and a few minutes later, while the gentleman was giving W. his instructions, they were both horrified by a piercing shriek and the sound of a fall, and rushing out, they found the child lying senseless on the floor, his face contorted with terror. The doctor was immediately summoned, and after some examination, he pronounced the child had to be suffering from a fit, apparently produced by a sudden shock. The boy was taken to one of the bedrooms and, after some time, recovered consciousness, but only to pass into a condition described by the medical man as one of violent hysteria. The doctor exhibited a strong sedative and in the course of 2 hours pronounced him fit to walk home. But in passing through the hall, the paroxysms of fright returned, and with additional violence. The father perceived that the child was pointing at some object and heard the old cry, "The man in the wood!" and looking in the direction indicated saw a stone head of a grotesque appearance, which had been built into the wall above one of the doors. It seemed the owner of the house had recently made alterations in his premises, and on digging the foundation for some office, the men had found a curious head, evidently of the Roman period, which had been placed in the manner described. The head is pronounced by the most experienced archaeologists of the district to be that of a faun or satyr. How do you say it? Satyrs? Wait. I definitely know what that is. I just don't know how to say it. Okay, yeah, it's sadder. Okay. Dr. Phillips tells me that he has seen the head in question and assures me that he never received such a vivid presentment of intense evil. Good night, Chris. Thanks for accompanying me. Sleep well. From whatever cause arising, the second shock seemed too severe for the boy Trevor, and at the present date he suffers from a weakness of intellect which gives but little promise of amending. Dang, why you call him an imbecile after he went through trauma? That's messed up. The matter caused a good deal of sensation at the time, and the girl Helen was closely questioned by Mr. R, but to no purpose. She steadfastly denied that she had frightened or in any way molested Trevor. The second event with which the girl's name is connected took place about 6 years ago and is of a still more extraordinary character. At the beginning of the summer 1882, Helen contracted a friendship of a peculiarly intimate character with Rachel M., the daughter of a prosperous farmer in the neighborhood. This girl, who was a year younger than Helen, was considered by most people to be the prettier of the two, though Helen's features had to a great extent softened as she became older. The two girls, who were together on every available opportunity, presented a singular contrast, the one with her clear olive skin and almost Italian appearance, and the other of the variable red and white of our rural district. It must be stated that the payments made to Mr. R for the maintenance of Helen were known in the village for their excessive liberality, and the impression was general that she would one day inherit a large sum of money from her relative. The parents of Rachel were therefore not averse from their daughter's friendship with the girl, and even encouraged the intimacy, though they now bitterly regret having done so. Helen still retained her extraordinary fondness for the forest, and on several occasions Rachel accompanied her, the two friends setting out early in the morning and remaining in the woods until dusk. Once or twice after these excursions, Mrs. M thought her daughter's manner rather peculiar. She seemed languid and dreamy, and, as it had been expressed, different from herself. But these peculiarities seemed to have been thought too trifling to remark. One evening, however, after Rachel had come home, her mother heard a noise which sounded like suppressed weeping in the girl's room, and on going in found her lying, half undressed, upon the bed, evidently in the greatest distress. As soon as she saw her mother, she exclaimed, "Ah, mother, why did you let me go to the forest with Helen?" Mrs. M was astonished at so strange a question and proceeded to make inquiries. Rachel told her a wild story. She said, Clark closed the book with a snap and turned his chair towards the fire. When his friend sat one evening in that very chair and told his story, Clark had interrupted him at a point a little subsequent to this, had cut short his words in a paroxysm of horror. "My God," he had exclaimed, think what you are saying. It's too incredible, too monstrous. Such things can never be in this quiet world where men and women live and die and struggle and conquer, or maybe fail and fall down under sorrow and grieve and suffer strange fortunes for many a year. But not this, Phillips. Not such things as this. Must be some explanation, some way out of the terror. Why, man, if such a case were possible, our earth would be a nightmare. But Phillips told his story to the end, concluding, "Her flight remains a mystery to this day. She had vanished in broad sunlight. They saw her walking in a meadow, and a few moments later she was not there." Clark tried to conceive the thing again, and as he sat by the fire, and again his mind shuddered and shrank back, appalled before the sight of such an awful, unspeakable elements enthroned as it were, and triumphant in human flesh. Before him stretched the long, dim vista of the green causeway in the forest, as his friends had described it. He saw the swaying leaves and the quivering shadows on the grass. He saw the sunlight and the flowers, and far away, far in the long distance, the two figures moved towards him. One was Rachel, but the other? Clark had tried his best to disbelieve it all, but at the end of the account, as he had written in this book, he had placed the inscription, Et diablos incarnatus est, et homo factus est. Okay. I think I know what it means, but like, well, let's translate it anyway. And the devil became incarnate and he became man. Okay. Whoa. All right. Part 3. We can definitely keep reading actually. There's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, let's stop at 4 and then like read the rest another time. I think that sounds good. We'll split it in half. Oof, I am thirsty. Yeah, this is pretty dark matter. Oof, okay. I did read that there was like some cosmic like unknown horror to this story. The way it's aiming at children at the moment as victims or minors, I think all of them actually so far. I think Clark had a touch of it when he sat on the chair, which the chair, I'm not sure how it connects to that, but it is something that is disturbing to confront, but very gothic in nature. And well, this is a gothic horror. So. Part 3, the City of Resurrections. Herbert, good God, is it possible? Yes, my name's Herbert. I think I know your face too, but I don't remember your name. My memory is very queer. Don't you recollect Villiers of Wadham? So it is. I beg your pardon, Villiers. I didn't think I was begging of an old college friend. Good night. My dear fellow, this haste is unnecessary. My rooms are close by, but we won't go there just yet. Suppose we walk up Shaftesbury Avenue a little way. But how in heaven's name have you come to this pass, Herbert? It's a long story, Villiers, and a strange one too, but you can hear it if you like. Come on then, take my arm. You don't seem very strong. Okay. 2 completely different folks, right? Is this like a collection of stories that include this like... I mean, no, because... Okay. Chris, I believe it's Clark, right? He connects the first 2 parts. Even if one is him reading something. The ill-assorted pair moved slowly up Rupert Street. The one in dirty, evil-looking rags, and the other attired in this... What are evil-looking rags? What the fuck? I swear these people used to hate poor people. What the hell? The other attired in the regulation uniform of a man about town, trim, glossy, and eminently well-to-do. Villiers had emerged from his restaurant after an excellent dinner of many courses, assisted by an ingratiating little flask of Chianti, and in that frame of mind which was with him, almost chronic, had delayed a moment by the door, peering round in the dimly lighted street in search of those mysterious incidents and persons with which the streets of London teem in every quarter and every hour. Villiers prided himself as a practiced explorer of such obscure mazes and byways of London life, and in this unprofitable pursuit he displayed an assiduity which was worthy of most serious employment. Thus he stood by the lamppost, surveying the passerbys with undisguised curiosity, and with the gravity known only to the systematic diner, had just enunciated in his mind the formula. London has been called the city of encounters. It is more than that. It is the city of resurrections. When these reflections were suddenly interrupted by a piteous whine at his elbow, and a deplorable appeal for alms. He looked around in some irritation and with a sudden shock found himself confronted with the embodied proof of his somewhat stilted fancies. There, close beside him, his face altered and disfigured by poverty and disgrace. So mean to poor folk. His body barely covered by greasy, ill-fitting rags, stood his old friend Charles Herbert, who had matriculated on the same day as himself, with whom he had been merry and wise for 12 revolving terms. This feels like a Darman sketch. What the fuck? Different occupations of varying interests had interrupted the friendship, and it was 6 years since Vayers had seen Herbert, and now he looked upon this wreck of a man with grief and dismay mingled with certain inquisitiveness as to what dreary chain of circumstances had dragged him down to such a doleful pass. Vayers felt together with compassion all the relish of the amateur in mysteries, and congratulated himself on his leisurely speculations outside the restaurant. What the fuck? They walked on in silence for some time, and more than one passerby stared in astonishment at the unaccustomed spectacle of a well-dressed man with an unmistakable beggar hanging on his arm, and observing this, Vayers led the way to an obscure street in Soho. Here he repeated his question. Wow, he's embarrassed of him. Wow, kill him. How on earth has it happened, Herbert? I always understood you would succeed to an excellent position in Dorsetshire. Did your father disinherit you? Surely not. No, Vayers. I came into all the property at my poor father's death. He died a year after I left Oxford. He was a very good father to me, and I mourned his death sincerely enough. But you know what young men are. Always blaming young men. This is the same thing that happened in Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Oh, I blew through the cash. Whatever. A few months later, I came up to town and went a good deal into society. Of course, I had excellent introductions, and I managed to enjoy myself very much in a harmless sort of way. I played a little, certainly, but never for heavy stakes. Oh, look where you are now, but okay. And the few bets I made on races brought me in money. Only a few pounds, you know, but enough to pay for cigars and such petty pleasures. It was in my second season that the tide turned about. Of course, have you heard of my marriage? Ooh, okay, blaming the marriage. No, I've never heard anything about it. Yes, I married Vayers. I met a girl of the most wonderful and most strange beauty. Oh my god, is he talking about her? I forgot her name. Oh yeah, Helen. Okay. Is this Helen? At the house of some people whom I knew. I cannot tell you her age. I never knew it, but so far as I can guess, should think she must have been about 19 when I made her acquaintance. I would love to leave the teen area, guys, but okay. My friends had come to know her at Florence. She told them she was an orphan, the child of an English father and an Italian mother, and she charmed them as she charmed me. The first time I saw her was at an evening party. I was standing by the door talking to a friend when suddenly, above the hum and babble of the conversation, I heard a voice which seemed to thrill my heart. She was singing an Italian song. I was introduced to her that evening, and in 3 months I married Helen. Vayers, that woman, if I can call her a woman, corrupted my soul. The night of the wedding, I found myself sitting in her bedroom in the hotel, listening to her talk. She was sitting up in bed, and I listened to her, and she spoke in her beautiful voice, spoke of things which even now I would not dare whisper in the blackest nights, though I stood in the midst of a wilderness. You, Vayers, you may think you know life and London and what goes on day and night in this dreadful city. For all I can say, you may have heard the talk of the vilest, but I tell you, you can have no conception of what I know. Not in your most fantastic, hideous dreams can you have imagined forth the faintest shadow of what I have heard and seen. Yes, seen! I have seen the incredible, such horrors that even I myself sometimes stop in the middle of the street and ask whether it is possible for a man to behold such things and live. In a year, Vayers, I was a ruined man in body and soul. In body and soul. But your property, Herbert, you had land in Dorset. I sold it all. The fields and woods, the dear old house, everything. And the money? She took it all from me. And then left you? Yes, she disappeared one night. I don't know where she went, but I'm sure if I saw her again, it would kill me. The rest of my story is of no interest. Sordid misery, that is all. You may think, Veers, that I have exaggerated and talked for effect, but I have not told you half. I could tell you certain things which would convince you, but you would never know a happy days again. You would pass the rest of your life as I passed mine, a haunted man, a man who has seen hell. Veers took the unfortunate man to his room, and he gave him a meal. Herbert could eat little and scarcely touch the glass of wine set before him. He sat moody and silent by the fires, and seemed relieved when Villiers sent him away with a small present of money. By the way, Herbert, said Villiers as they parted at the door, what was your wife's name? You said Helen, I think? Helen what? The name she passed under when I met her was Helen Vong, but what her real name was I cannot say. I don't think she had a name. No, not in that sense. Only human beings have a name, Villiers. I can't say any more. Goodbye. Yes, I will not fail to call if I see any way in which you can help me. Good night. I don't think he offered, but okay, I'm sure he will help you. The man went out into the bitter night, and Villiers returned to his fireside. There was something about Herbert which shocked him inexpressibly. Not his poor rags, nor the marks which poverty had set upon his face, but rather an indefinite terror which hung about him like a mist. He had acknowledged that he himself was not devoid of blame. The woman, he had avowed, had corrupted him in body and soul, and Villiers felt that this man, once his friend, had been an actor in scenes evil beyond the powers of words. His story needed no confirmation. He himself was the embodied proof of it. Villiers mused curiously over the story he had heard, and wondered whether he had heard both the first and last of it. No, he thought, certainly not the last, perhaps only the beginning. A case like this is like a nest of Chinese boxes. You open one after the other, and find a quarter workmanship in every box. Most likely, poor Herbert is merely one of the outside boxes. There are stranger ones to follow. Ooh, turn back. You're gonna get seduced. And then your money's gonna get taken. Villiers could not take his mind away from Herbert and his story, which seemed to grow wilder as the night wore on. The fire seemed to burn low, and the chilly air of the morning crept into the room. Villiers got up with a glance over his shoulder, and shivering slightly, went to bed. A few days later, he saw at his club a gentleman of his acquaintance named Austin, who was famous for his intimate knowledge of London life, both in its tenebrous and luminous phases. Villiers, still full of his encounter in Soho and its consequences, thought Austin might possibly be able to shed some light on Herbert's history, and so, after some casual talk, he suddenly put the question, do you happen to know anything of a man named Herbert? Charles Herbert? Austin turned around sharply and stared at Villiers with some astonishment. Charles Herbert? Weren't you in town 3 years ago? No, then you have not heard of the Paul Street case. It caused a good deal of sensation at the time. What was the case? Well, a gentleman, a man of very good position, was found dead, stark dead, in the area of a certain house in Paul Street, off Tottenham Court Road. Of course, the police did not make the discovery. If you happen to be sitting up all night and have a light in your window, the constable will ring the bell. But if you happen to be lying dead in somebody's area, you will be left alone. In this instance, as in many others, the alarm was raised by some kind of vagabond. I don't mean a common tramp or a public house loafer, but a gentleman whose business or pleasure or both made him a spectator of the London streets at 5 o'clock in the morning. Oh. These folks, whatever. I hope it happens to you. I hope it keeps happening to you. This individual was, as he said, going home. It did not appear whence or whither and had occasion to pass through Paul Street between 4 and 5 a.m. Something or other caught his eye at number 20. He said, absurdly enough, that the house had the most unpleasant physiognomy? What? Okay, hold up. How do you say that word? Physiognomy is the practice of judging a person's character, personality, or inner disposition from their outward physical appearance. Oof, kill me now. That the house had the most unpleasant I literally just said it. Physiognomy? No, I need to hear it again. Fuck me. What did they say? Physiognomy. Okay. Had the most unpleasant physiognomy. Right. He had ever observed. But at any rate, he glanced down the area and was a great deal astonished to see a man lying on the stones, his limbs all huddled together and his face turned up. Our gentleman thought his face looked peculiarly ghastly, and so set off on a run in search of the nearest policeman. The constable was at first inclined to treat this matter lightly, suspecting common drunkenness. However, he came and, after looking at the man's face, changed his tone quickly enough. The early bird who had come picked up this fine worm was sent for a doctor, and the policeman rang and knocked the door until a slatternly servant girl came down looking more than half asleep. She's probably in on it. The constable pointed out the contents of the area to the maid, who screamed loudly enough to wake up the street. She knew nothing of the man, had never seen him at the house, and so forth. Meanwhile, the original discoverer had come back with a medical man, and since things were about to get into the area, and the next thing was to get into the area. Whoa, I misread that really bad. Damn. The gate was open, so the whole quartet stomped down the steps. The doctor hardly needed a moment's examination. He said the poor fellow's been dead for several hours, and it was then that the case began to get interesting. Let's go. The dead man had not been robbed, and in one of his pockets were papers identifying him as a man of good family and means, a favorite in society and nobody's enemy as far as could be known. I don't give his name, Vayers, because it has nothing to do with the story and because it's no good ranking up these affairs about the dead when there are no relations to the living. The next curious point was that the medical man could not agree as to how he met his death. There were some slight bruises on his shoulder, but they were so slight that it looked as if he had been pushed roughly out of the kitchen door and not thrown over the railings from the street or even dragged down the steps. But there were positively no other marks of violence about him, certainly none that would account for his death, and when they came to the autopsy, there wasn't a trace of the poison of any kind. Of course, the police wanted to know all about the people at number 20, and here again, so I have heard from private sources, one or two other very curious points came out. Let me stretch. It appears that the occupants of the house were Mr. and Mrs. Charles Herbert. He was said to be a land proprietor, though it struck most people that Paul Street was not exactly the place to look for country gentry. As for Mrs. Herbert, nobody seemed to know who or what she was, and between ourselves, I fancy the divers after her history found themselves in rather strange. Wait. Nobody seemed to know who or what she was, and between ourselves, I fancy the drivers after her history found themselves in a rather strange waters. I don't think I get that sentence. I was like looking at it like 2 times. Of course, they both denied knowing anything about the deceased, and in fault of any evidence against them, they were discharged. But some very odd things came out about them. Though it was between 5 and 6 in the morning when the dead man was removed, a large crowd had collected and several of the neighbors ran to see what was going on. They were pretty free with their comments by all accounts, and from these it appeared that number 20 was in very bad odor in Paul Street. The detectives tried to trace down the rumors to some old foundation of fact, but could not get a hold of anything. People shook their heads and raised their eyebrows, and thought the Herberts rather queer, would rather not be seen going into their house, and so on, but there was nothing tangible. The authorities were morally certain that the man met his death in some way or another in the house and was thrown out by the kitchen, but they couldn't prove it, and the absence of any indication of violence or poisoning left them helpless. That's too real. An odd case, wasn't it? But curiously enough, there was something more that I haven't told you. I happen to know one of the doctors who was consulted as to the cause of death, and sometime after the inquest, I met him and asked him about it. Do you really mean to tell me, I said, that you were baffled by the case, that you actually don't know what the man died of? Pardon me, he replied. I know perfectly well what caused death. Blank died of fright, of sheer and awful terror. I'd never seen future so hideously contorted in the entire course of my practice, and I'm going crazy, and I have seen the faces of a whole host of the dead. The doctor was usually a cool customer enough, and a certain vehemence in his manner struck me, but I couldn't get anything more out of him. I suppose the Treasury didn't see their way to prosecuting the Herberts for frightening a man to death. At any rate, nothing was done, and the case dropped out of men's minds. Do you happen to know anything, Herbert? Anything of Herbert? Well, yes, replied Beers. He was an old college friend of mine. You don't say so. Have you ever seen his wife? No, I haven't. I've lost sight of Herbert for many years. It's queer, isn't it? Parting with a man at the college gate or at Paddington, seeing nothing of him for years, and then finding him pop up his head in such an odd place. But I should like to have seen Mrs. Herbert. People said extraordinary things about her. What sort of things? Well, I hardly know how to tell you this. Everyone who saw her at the police court said she was at once the most beautiful woman and the most repulsive that they had ever set their eyes on. I have spoken to a man who saw her, and I assure you he positively shuddered as he tried to describe the woman, but he couldn't tell me why. She seems to have been a sort of enigma, and I expect that if one dead man could have told tales, he would have told some uncommonly queer ones. And there you are again in another puzzle. What could a respectable country gentleman like Mr. Blank, we'll call him that if you don't mind, want in such a very queer house at number 20? It's altogether a very odd case, isn't it? It is indeed, Austin, an extraordinary case. I didn't think when I asked you about my old friend, I should strike on such a strange metal. I should strike on such a strange metal. Well, I must be off. Good day. Villiers went away, thinking of his own conceit of the Chinese boxers. Here was a quaint workmanship indeed. All right. Actually, I know I said I'd take it to number 4, but like I got a little sleepy. And we're almost at 2, so that's fine. That's fine. We'll pick this up. And also we read Monkey Spawn at the beginning, so I think it'll balance, hopefully. Number 4, Discovery in Paul Street. It is somewhat of a cliffhanger because it's like mid-story within the story. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this writing style was like popular back then because like this really reminds me of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I keep pointing back to that. I mean, no, not in the structure, not in the subject matter. Just I guess this classes theme. Or maybe, like I said, that's the writing style. Maybe they just hated poor people back then. I don't know. But back then, I say whatever. Anyway, yeah, I'm intrigued to continue it. I did read some conflicting, not opinions, because I didn't want to spoil myself, but like I read some brief ones, I guess. And so I'm not surprised at what I'm getting. I think I kind of expected that. Yeah, but also you should. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, yeah. Next week we will be playing Ace Attorney, and then I have to fly. So I had a lovely time. Thank you so much for accompanying me. I always get surprised when folks tune in when I'm reading it, but I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And what else? Oh, I mean, plans are happening, but there is a possibility with Aleta moving here that I might she low-key wants to kind of start. Well, I don't know. Okay, I won't make the announcement. No, I should. I already practically said it. Like a podcast, but I don't know. I don't know about that. I would be speaking, but it also would be probably like pre-recorded or whatever. So I don't know. I'm open to my sisters trying out new things in this channel. So I'm a little happy because I know like Kaya. I don't talk about Kaya much, but like she's my older sister. You know how older siblings are like more mature and stuff like that. She be, you know, probably more normie than Aleta. So I don't talk about her much, but she's doing well. But she wants to like sing more music like we did in Dia de Enero. So yeah, I mean, part of it is like I do want to share stuff with my siblings. So maybe we'll start a podcast. I'm not really sure. I'm still not sure about her topic. I think I don't know. We'll try it. I don't see the harm in trying it. Why not? But that's Aleta and me. Kaya is more comfortable speaking Spanish. So yeah, that's it. Good night. Have a nice night. Have a lovely Monday, and I'll see you Tuesday for Ace Attorney. Bye. Good night. I do like this one. I do think it has more structure and more intrigue in it. This part is kind of slow. This part 3. Yeah, I think it is a little slow. And giving. Well, we'll see if the details come up. But I think I just get reminded of Dr. Jekyll a little. But I don't know. I do wonder about the ending. Like the story within the story, inception of it all is the only thing that's like, I don't know. We'll see where it goes. I am somewhat curious. Anyway, good night. Bye-o.